Welcome back to the Nikki Clarke Show. The show is about transforming lives one story at a time, and we invite people from all walks of life to share their heart stories, stories of transformation and upliftment, and excited to invite another amazing individual on the line. Steve Anderson is the Deputy Mayor of the town of Shelburne and the Regional Councillor for the County of Dufferin. He is the author of a new book, and I'm going to let him talk about his incredible journey putting it together. So please, without further ado, Steve Anderson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nikki. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. So, Steve, I know you're out in the public and you do so much. You're a big advocate in the community for so many amazing groups. But I don't think a lot of people know a lot about the journey that you took to get where you are right now, and I'd love to hear that. So can you tell us a little bit about your background leading up to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the opportunity to share my story with your audience. My story and journey started from what I would say is humble beginnings. I grew up in a neighborhood called Jane and Finch, maybe very familiar to a lot of your listeners. With my mom and dad at the time, we had moved from Etobicoke to Jane and Finch, so this was an area that was completely brand new to me at the time, and so I was basically as a youth really getting acclimatized to my new environment. And before I could even do all that, my parents underwent a separation, and that really changed my life for a long period of time. I was there with now my single mother and 6 brothers and 1 sister, and so needless to say, it was a new transition for all of us, and what I'd call almost feeling like a foreign land or a foreign community. So certainly had its challenges, its ups and downs, but living in Jane and Finch really defined me and my character and my drive, as we're about to talk about, as you mentioned, about the book that I'm writing, Driven to Succeed. All of that was birthed in the Jane and Finch community, and so I owe a lot to that community, and that's why I make it a point to speak proudly about Jane and Finch, and also make it a point to go back and try to inspire our youth as well.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit about your upbringing, like in terms of going to school. What was it like for you? Were you involved in a lot of activities, athletics? What was your kind of routine like growing up?
Yeah. So it's being involved in sports. I was very social as a child. Making friends wasn't really difficult. But being involved in sports was something that I strived to do. It was my escapism, if I may put it that way, in the sense that in Jane and Finch there were a lot of problems, and I say this in the book, where the perception and the characterization of the community, you felt it. It was something that weighed on you, right? And you would use sports, or for other kids they may have used other things as an outlet. And so I used sports for that outlet. But what I quickly realized is the stain and the perception of the area started to make its way into my outlets. And so where I would use these outlets to escape from the reality of the situation, it was now entering into those very sacred spaces. And what I mean by that is, when I was playing sports, and let's say we were playing a rival basketball team, we would hear, from the coaches, for example, our coaches, hey guys, sorry, we're not going to be able to go ahead with the game because the opposing team has cited, security issues or concerns, or they're not coming anymore. And so, as much as we tried, or I tried to escape sort of the realities, it just kept rearing its ugly head over and over again. So yes, as a child, of course, I was engaged in activities to try to keep myself out of trouble, because living in these areas, if you're not trying to keep yourself out of trouble, it could really grab a hold of you. So I tried to keep that balancing act of staying focused. And there were times I was able to do that, Nikki, and there were times that I wasn't. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Understandable. Now, there are many people listening to this interview, and some may be out of the Toronto area, listening from New York City in particular. So if you could give kind of a comparison of Jane and Finch maybe to somewhere else so that they can have an understanding of, the environment that you grew up in. Can you give us a little bit of an elaboration of what that is?
Sure. So, for your listeners in New York City, maybe it would be seen as Harlem, the Bronx, would probably be the first image that would come to mind that maybe for those in New York that are listening may sort of think of, that sort of hard edge, hard knocks, survival of the fittest area, where, trouble is just a simple turn away. And, if you're going to make it out of that area, it's going to take a yeoman's effort to be able to do that because the odds are against you. So for your listeners in New York, when I reference those areas in New York, I think that would give them a sense, or anybody in the States, once I say those places, would give them a sense of sort of what we were dealing with, what I was dealing with as a child.
Absolutely. So, Steve, you're coming from a place where you're seeing a lot of like social issues are all around you. You're connecting with people who are probably not the best influence, but you still get to the point where you become a practicing litigation lawyer for over 15 years now with the Toronto Transit. I mean, that's incredible. So what is it that you have or what you've learned in your own kind of personality makeup that would make you the person you are? What kind of values do you have intrinsically, do you think, to get you where you were to where you are now?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I don't want any of your viewers to think that somehow I was just some sort of superhuman individual with all these powers that I was able to sort of escape this area on my own. The old saying is it takes a village. The drive and the work ethic was really seen inside the home. That's where it really started for me. I was able to see how hard my mom worked, especially after the separation. She worked in a factory, taking care of all of us, never made any excuses. My mother never missed a day from work, never took a vacation day in 25 years when she worked at this factory. And I had the good privilege to work with her as a summer student at the factory that she worked at. And so I was able to see not only her work ethic in the home and how much she was valued in the home, but I was also able to see her work ethic in her place of employment and how much she was valued there. And so seeing that and being like a sponge and internalizing that, I started to develop that same work ethic myself. And so it started with what I saw, internalizing that example. And I must say, as I talked about sort of the village experience, even though I had that in the home, when the separation occurred, I was in a dark space. And I started to latch on to other folks that, as I say in the book, that were eager to sort of exploit my frustrations. And I could have easily, if I stayed with that group, the story that we're talking about today could have been much different. And so it really comes down to choices, Nikki. But fortunately for me, what really turned the tide, because you could come from a good home and a good background and good examples and still go down the wrong path. And so what turned the tide for me is, yes, I had the drive. Yes, I had the example at home. But what I talk about in the book, Nikki, is the importance of friendships. And and I say that for this point because oftentimes people talk about, choosing the right spouse, the right community, the right job, etc. And they tend to sort of further down the list talk about the importance of selecting the right friends, especially when you're young. Because your friends could either, put you on the right path or on the bad path. And fortunately for me, after I got out of that tailspin, those friends came and helped me out of that tailspin and encouraged me and brought me to heights that even at the time I didn't think that I could achieve. Right.
And that is such an excellent point. I friends are like, destiny helpers. But they can also be destiny distractors, right? So it's really important, like you said, to have that discernment at a young age to know which one to turn to help you through this amazing journey called life. So I'm looking at one of the excerpts here, and it talks about, your time being interviewed for the Toronto Transit Commission after graduating law school at the University of Ottawa. This excerpt from the book you're about to release, Driven to Succeed. And if I may, can I read it?
Absolutely.
The whole interview experience with the TTC was surreal. As a child growing up in Jane and Finch, I would take the TTC with my mother every Saturday morning to attend church services. And I vividly recall wanting to be a TTC bus driver, imagining myself wearing the iconic blue shirt, red tie, and gray pants. And as a young passenger on the TTC bus, I depended on the bus drivers to take me safely to my destination. Many years later, bus drivers were now depending on me to prepare and represent them in court. That's just profound. Amazing.
It brings chills of mine. That my hairs on my arm are just standing up after you read that, and it's my story, and yet just hearing that just brings me back to that as you've eloquently read, that sort of surreal moment, that how could a kid from Jane and Finch, especially with the perception that, spiritually they would say nothing good comes from Nazareth, that how could this kid, taking this Jane bus amount to where he now becomes the first black lawyer ever hired at the Toronto Transit Commission. The Toronto Transit Commission opened their doors in the 1950s. And here I was coming out of Jane and Finch, being now the first black lawyer that they've hired in their history. And that remained the case up until just recently, I would say maybe 2 years ago, if that, where they hired another lawyer within the legal department, a black female. So for that period of time, I was the only person. Thank God there's more, and more will be on the way. But, when I think about it, it is entirely surreal.
It is. Very special, a very special individual, I have to say. And there's just so much more to learn about you. And so that path was created, and then it opened up another path to moving to Shelburne and then going into a political lane. Can you talk about that, becoming involved in politics?
Yeah. I got my first taste of politics. I'm very thankful to my experience at the TTC. I was able to use my platform at the TTC, being a very reputable brand that a lot of people knew, and that opened a lot of doors for me and allowed me to go and speak in a lot of schools in the GTA and really encourage kids by telling my story. But how I got involved in politics, my first taste actually was as I was working as a lawyer with the TTC. They had this shooting. It was the dancing shooting, I believe, at a community barbecue that a couple of young people, I believe, were killed. And the whole community was sort of up in arms, of course. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of sadness. There was a lot of talk about needing to get things done. And so I was sitting in my office at the time, and I thought to myself, how could I use my platform to make changes? And so I just went online, and I found two individuals that immediately came up. One was Tony Perusa, and the other one was Mario Sergio. That represented Mario Sergio is in my former neighborhood of Jane and Finch. And so I just sent them an email saying, listen, here's who I am. I just want to be able to help anything that I can with respect to curbing gun violence. Both of them responded, and I met up with both of them. But it was Mario Sergio who took it a step further, who invited me to a roundtable discussion at Yorkgate Mall. So, again, just thinking about this is so surreal, because here I am, this skinny kid in Jane and Finch that was, going down the wrong path. And here I am now being invited by a politician to go at Yorkgate Mall, a place I used to go hang around at, and now I'm being invited back there to have a roundtable discussion with community stakeholders, himself, and Dr. Eric Hoskins, who was appointed by the province to go to different communities and speak to stakeholders about getting involved, resolving gun violence. So it was that experience that I was exposed to that I thought to myself, I could actually maybe step onto a larger platform and be able to help a lot more people. And so when I moved to Shelburne, an opportunity came about where one of the councillors had passed away. This was in 2017. And I thought to myself, you know what? I've always thought about doing this, or I had that thought when I had that experience. Maybe I could throw my hat in the ring and see what happens. And so I did. They had an open call process. And long story short, I was able to get appointed as a councillor for the remaining of that election term, which was only 10 months. And at the end of the 10 months, it was the 2018 election, and it was at that point that I ran for deputy mayor.
Fantastic. And here you are, right? How many years is it? Has it been about 2 years now in?
Few years into the mandate, as they would say. The next elections will be in 2022. Okay.
Can I ask you, is it too early to ask, are you going to be running again?
I would love to run again. I don't feel a jinx to say that. I think I'd like to say that there was a mandate that I got elected on. There were promises of transformation to our community that I said I was wanting to make, some of which I've had the opportunity to make, but there's a lot more to do. And if given the opportunity, yes, absolutely, I'd like to continue.
Okay, from what I see, Steve, incredible changes happening in Shelburne, and you're a fantastic contribution to the success of the town. So I don't think you should go anywhere. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's just my endorsement.
I hope I can get some more voters like you in the area, but I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, no worries. So, Steve, I mean, I know there's so much more that we can learn about you, and I'm sure the listeners have tons of things that they would love to ask you. How can people find you on social media?
Well, they can find me on Facebook at Deputy Mayor Steve Anderson, on Instagram at Councillor Steve, Twitter, Deputy Mayor Steve. You can find me there as well, and on LinkedIn. You can find me there under my name as well. So those are my social media handles. Feel free to drop me a line if you have any questions or you're just curious to see what I'm doing. That's a good opportunity to do just that.
Excellent. And Steve, tell us, where can people get a copy of the book, Driven to Succeed?
Yes, and so the book is scheduled to be released in February, just in time for Black History Month. It will be available for purchase on Amazon. My website will be ready soon, so there will be an opportunity to purchase it through the website. And I do want to say that 100% of the proceeds will be going to community organizations, one being Operation Black Vote, One Voice, One Team, and also to the Dufferin County Canadian Black Association.
Fantastic. Well, that's great to know that you're giving back. Every little bit goes back to the community that supported you where you are now. So amazing. Steve, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate everything that you shared. And, this is an invitation to come back because the book is going to be released in February. So we got to get you back on the show when it's out, right? Hot off the press. I want to have the fourth story. I want to be the one. So let's arrange that again.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Okay. Well, you have been listening to the Nikki Clarke Show with a very special guest, Steve Anderson. Please reach out to him on social media. Get a copy of his book when it's going to be released, February 2021, and he'll be back on the show to tell us more about other developments. All right. So thank you again, Steve. Stay strong, stay safe, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye for now.